All right, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today as we discuss the essentials of protecting and enabling remote workers. We've got a great webinar for you today. We're actually going to kick it off by touching on some of the risks and benefits that companies are experiencing when it comes to remote work. We're then going to take a little bit of a deep dive into a customer case study where we'll walk you through step-by-step the challenges and the solutions that a customer experienced when transitioning their workforce to remote. And then throughout this process, we'll actually explain which solutions were most crucial to protecting and enabling the employees. And at the end, we'll kind of finish up with jumping into a quick NewCloud overview and finish with some Q&A from our presenters as well. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to your speakers today. You're going to be hearing from myself, Sydney Diedrich. I'm actually the NewCloud Network Sales Operations and Marketing Manager. And you'll also hear from my colleague, Chad St. Thomas. He's one of our cloud architects and cloud engineers here at NewCloud. And then we'll also hear from Dan Burke, who's the territory manager over at Veeam Software. The really great thing about us is that each of us works directly with our customers to build custom tailored solutions and strategies that offer the most seamless transitions to both remote working and to the cloud as a whole. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. Oh, just a quick housekeeping before we do jump right in. This is going to be a panel discussion. We're going to be hearing from myself. You're going to hear from Chad. You're going to hear from Dan. We're going to be interrupting each other. We're trying to keep it a little informal and interesting for you all here on the call today. And on that same sort of path, questions are welcome. We'll do our best to answer questions as they come in through the chat so that you can contribute to the conversation. But if we don't get to them on the fly, we'll be sure to get to them at the end. So please feel free to use the question feature on the screen. And then another note on handouts. So in the same realm where the question feature is, there's also some handouts and resources available for you guys to download and share with your colleagues and learn more about the solutions we're going to be talking about today. And then for those of you who are interested in a meal credit, we will have a survey at the end of the webinar. Go ahead and fill out that survey and your meal credit will be sent to your email. And now with that, we'll go ahead and dive right in. So unless you've been living under a rock, hate to use that saying, but it's true, you know that remote work has seen exponential growth this year. And largely, we can attribute that, I guess largely, really more than anything, we can attribute that to the coronavirus pandemic. We're actually being told by FlexJobs that 87% growth has been seen in America alone from a remote work perspective. And chances are, you might be working from home right now. You might be watching this webinar remotely. If you aren't, you've probably worked remotely at some point over the last 12 months. And you might be finding yourself at sort of like a crossroads on a decision process of how to handle post-pandemic life. Do we bring our employees back in the office full time? Do we allow them to work part-time from home, part-time in the office? Or do we just send them home and say full-time remote? It's a tough question, and it's a question that many business leaders are navigating right now. In fact, Gartner tells us that after the pandemic, it's estimated around 80% of companies will allow employees to work remotely at least part-time, and 47% will allow employees to work from home full-time. So really, what we're hearing is that remote work isn't going anywhere. In some capacity or another, it's here to stay. It's just a matter of what that looks like for your business. And it's no wonder that it's not going anywhere because honestly, there are several business benefits that companies are experiencing when it does come to remote work. The first one that may or may not apply to you as your individual business, everyone is different, but low overhead costs. We're hearing a lot of our customers that are working to transition their office space, either downsizing it, either not renewing their lease, or working on closing it down altogether. So this allows you to pocket that extra funds that would normally go to your office space and maybe apply it to a different area of your business. A lot of companies are working just to accommodate the essential employees in the office. But we, again, this varies business to business. Working from home overall, though, does allow your businesses to get creative when it comes to overhead.
Sydney, this is Dan. I was in the car the other day and listened to the radio, and they were talking about some of these huge enterprises that are now seriously considering not bringing employees back, probably for some of the reasons here on the additional graphics, but I was really surprised. I can't remember. I was looking for it actually. It was GE or GM or one of these enterprises, right? So it's different than what we might imagine for the SMB market or the mid-market and commercial. We're really looking at potentially having remote workforces for the future across all industries and business sides. So I thought that was really interesting, and I, for whatever reason, it caught my ear because I was like, this is one of these companies. I want to say it was in the one of the big Detroit car companies. One of these folks who you would think have not only a major investment in office space, but also want to have people in the office and able to collaborate, but they're definitely keeping folks remote.
Yeah, and absolutely. We're definitely seeing that, among the quote unquote FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet, Google, Netflix, and so on and so forth. Those big tech companies are also working on this transition. They're closing down office spaces. They're allowing employees more flexibility to work wherever they see fit, because leading into the next benefit, they're seeing increased productivity. Google is really famous for having so many different benefits on site at their campuses to we like to say, keep their employees there and working and happy. The free food, the nap rooms, the bikes all around campus. I don't know if any of you have been or live in the area or been around or heard about it or watched any of those shows on HBO or whatever. But there's a lot of companies that have already put that stuff in place on site to keep employees happy. And now we're finding that remote work is just as, if not more, effective in increasing productivity. People aren't as big of slaves to their clocks, right? We're not dealing with the traffic. We're not dealing with the commute. We're not rushing home to get to our families at the end of the day. So if you're like me, you're starting early and then all of a sudden looking up after being just totally ingrained in a task and realizing it's 7 o'clock at night and it's dinner time or what have you, just because we're not so by the clock when we're working from home. It's easy to lose track of time and be more productive because of that. And so, yeah, to your point, Dan, there's a lot of different reasons that people are looking to go remote after the pandemic. And a big one too, arguably, and it depends on your preferences as a business or your pillars of what you value, but happy and people who are happy tend to stay with a company for a longer time. So we're finding that a lot of employees are really enjoying the flexibility when it comes to remote work. People can work from anywhere. Dan and I, we were talking before this call about people working from Bali remote for companies in the United States, or people, here we're in Colorado who are just getting an Airbnb in the mountains and having a beautiful scenery while they do their work. So there's a lot of great things to be said from, a personal perspective for employees who get to work remotely and have that more flexibility. But again, from a business perspective, those employees that stay, that's money in your pocket, not having to train them or train new employees as they have to be onboarded and so on and so forth. And you're experiencing more turnover with people who are just dissatisfied for one reason or another. But again, flexibility is a great talking point as well. But it's not always, roses and cherries and happy thoughts when it comes to the benefits, when it comes to remote work, right? We do see some risks as well. And Chad, would you mind just kind of running into some of the risks that we're seeing here in the industry today?
Sure, no worries. Hi, everybody, this is Chad. So kind of what Sydney was just touching on is now that everybody's pretty much focused on working from home, there's a lot of risk now that is associated with all of that, just because we're sharing and accessing more data more than ever, with remote devices being an integral part of this whole process. But there's a lot of involved risk that comes with that. For example, being the fact that There are security policies now that are harder to apply from group policy now that people are no longer a part of the networks. You're having to utilize things like VPNs and things like that just to be able to manage connections. And that's when we start getting to the issue of like the home route. So people's home networks typically aren't very secure if they're just somebody who, they only got internet so I can get on the internet and watch Netflix. They're not really thinking about keeping somebody from getting inside their network. And that also kind of goes into the same fact with public Wi-Fi. So people who maybe are having to go to Starbucks to work because maybe they didn't consider their Wi-Fi beforehand, and their kids are taking all the bandwidth during the day because they're stuck at home too, right? So there's a lot of different hurdles now that we have to kind of consider whenever we're going and moving forward with remote workforce. So that being said, a part of that is the new challenges that come with that. People, when they're working from home, they don't want to have any downtime or any data loss. A good example would be my wife, for example. Her company's MSP is barely keeping up with the remote workforce, and their VPN crashes 3 or 4 times a day. So that greatly affects productivity over the long term, and that's something that needs to be thought of whenever moving with the remote workforce. On top of that fact that if there are outages and things of that concern, making sure that we have backups of all of that data for just that fact alone, on top of the increased security risks of ransomware and other things like that, that would also make us want to make sure that we keep all of that data backed up. Now, as a part of all of that, now we're having things like compliance and retention goals, because now people are moving to O365 from on-prem servers. And now you're having to think about, how am I keeping all of these emails from the next 7 years, or for whatever compliance that you're working with. Then there's an additional pain point now that people are being presented with. Now, on top of that, if something were to happen, now that everyone's working from home, how do we recover these devices, these emails, or any of these things that we might have to look at as a whole whenever someone might lose connection, or their data's gone, or, oh, I just deleted this file and I need it back. Can you guys get it for me, kind of stuff. And then all of that kind of ties into being able to protect that data while somebody is working from home.
It's funny, Chad. I was thinking about this remote working thing as we were talking about this a couple of days ago, and it is amazing how much less tolerant people seem to be when working remotely than they were in the office. I spent 10 years as the IT director, and you could have outages at the office and it didn't seem to be as impactful maybe, or whatever, but our tolerance has changed really significantly, right?
Yeah, because whenever I remember when I'd be at work and there's an outage while I was at work, if it didn't affect me or my customers directly, I was like, oh, great, I get a good 15-minute break. Now, whenever my wife is having trouble with her VPN at home, she's literally driving herself crazy because she can't do anything and she's stuck at home. So it just kind of exacerbates that emotion.
Sure. Maybe she's bugging you. Sorry, I see we've got a poll up here, Sydney.
Yeah. So we've launched a poll. It should pop up on your screen. Really, at this point, we kind of want to hear from you. We want to know, what has your experience been with this situation? Are you guys seeing any additional security measures that are being deployed on your businesses to help assist with remote work? Security, as Chad is mentioning, is a big concern, especially when you can't control that network, when you can't control that device. It's kind of out of your bubble in some regards. So there's a lot of different solutions out there that can help, but it can be kind of confusing on how to navigate those. So thank you so much for taking the time to fill in the poll here. I'll share the results in a moment. Looks like we still have a few coming in as well. I'm going to go ahead and close it and then share the results. So you guys can see now that we've got about 52% of you who, yes, you've deployed additional security measures, which is great. 23% are unsure, and then 25% say no. So it's kind of split down the middle. Well, I'm kind of including the unsure in the no category, but it's interesting to note how everyone is handling the remote workforce. And with that, I'll go to the next slide here. So really, the overall challenge that we're experiencing, that we're seeing, you've heard a little bit about the risks and the benefits here, but the question of the moment is, how do we minimize these risks and maximize the benefits for our remote workers. And that kind of leads me into another poll question for you guys. So I'm going to launch this here. What's your biggest challenge that you've seen working remotely from your particular side of the business? It might be communication, it might be security and compliance, it might be productivity. We talked about productivity being a benefit, but Chad already showed us that there's different things that pop up from a technical perspective that can really impact productivity. Data and device management is so difficult when you're remote and your IT team is having to deal with so many different networks and so many different devices and so many different people. That can get very cumbersome. And there's, of course, others that we may not have mentioned yet, but really excited to hear from you guys on what your biggest challenges are. We'll give it a moment here as these whole responses are coming in. And thanks for the participation, guys. Hoping this is keeping it interesting for you.
Under others, do I get to include my dogs barking when the
my goodness,
when the Amazon
your
Prime
children
comes, right, kids in the background? I know, Sydney, you've got a
feel
little
attacked.
one
That was me yesterday.
So we got crying babies in the background. Everybody's got something.
Yeah.
I was saying, actually, I was thinking about this. From a productivity perspective, I mean, I've worked from home after spending almost 20 years working in an office, but my position with Veeam has me on the road, or at least used to have me on the road. And I really like being able to work from home, and I always have. Maybe it's because I'm a workaholic, but I do tend to have that productivity right out of the gate. At 7 in the morning, taking a look at my email and seeing who's having problems or who's got questions right away, and then working into the evening and not wasting time in the car. But having everybody at home definitely has cut into my ability to be able to be as productive, right? So I'll be looking forward to when school gets back to normal for sure.
Absolutely. And my daughter, I was telling my colleagues here on the call before we launched, I got her down for a nap, so we're good to go. But yeah, so I just shared the results with everyone. It looks like above and beyond, and I wouldn't say above and beyond, but majority of people are saying security and compliance is a really big challenge that you're experiencing, followed by communication, and then data and device management is thin, and then productivity. So all of them obviously are very relevant challenges, and hopefully we can give you some insight into how we can navigate these as we continue through this webinar. So thank you again for that. And right now, I want to put these challenges into perspective. So we have a study that this is a real customer. We've changed their name to protect their identity. We'll call them Trusted Trucking for the purposes of this webinar. But real customer who came to us back in March on the onset of the pandemic, never really having put employees in a remote workforce setting before. They're what you would call an essential service, so transportation and trucking. They do short and long distance freight, logistics, and transportation services throughout the Western U.S., over 500 employees. So a lot of those are essential, but there's a good portion that are quote non-essential workers as well. And we worked with them in the past. So this wasn't really a new relationship. I do want to give you some background into what solutions were already in place just to kind of set the tone. Again, I've said it in the past, every company is different, and what you have currently deployed is going to be different than what Trusted Trucking had deployed already. But they weren't kind of coming from scratch. They had a cloud solution in place with us, a private cloud. They've deployed backup and disaster recovery, and they had hosted phones and managed services as well. So it wasn't, again, working from scratch. Chad actually worked directly with this customer to go through this transition. So we'll be hearing a lot from Chad down this process. But really kind of the first challenge that they came to us with was, how do we enable our employees to access our servers now that everyone is working from home? So Chad, can you kind of walk through how you approached this question with the customer and what that looked like?
Sure, definitely. So kind of let Sydney kind of got the spoiler going, but the first thing we did was virtual desktops. Obviously, that's kind of your clear and immediate focus the moment you're deciding you're going to have to move to a virtual or a mobile workforce, mainly on the fact that you don't really want, and this is kind of going around that security and the data safe, you don't necessarily want everyone working on their laptops and then saving all the information to their laptop. Now, we will talk about if that happens to be a problem case going on, but off the top, you would want to have that stuff virtualized so that if there were any problems with the employee's laptop or whatever desktop that they're doing at home, their data isn't completely lost, at least off the cuff, as well as securing all of the work that they're doing within that virtual desktop that you wouldn't really want them doing. Because if they're doing stuff with credit card numbers or other private personal information, you don't really want the risk of having that information being saved on your employees' laptops, where it could then be at risk to any ransomware, phishing, or any other reason why that data might be accessible by somebody it shouldn't.
And just to chime in here really quick, Chad, another thing when we're talking about post-pandemic life when it comes to virtual desktops, if people are working remotely from different locations and all over the globe, theft is a big concern. And so they might get the device, but they're not going to get your data that's on your virtual desktop. So that's a really important factor as well when we're talking about this solution.
Exactly. And then on top of that, if you're also working in like Linux or things that maybe you have older users that don't have the ability to be able to utilize the software that you're needed to work, that virtual desktop will help you navigate those situations so that you can have people working on, maybe if it's a Linux machine or something like that, but they don't need to have one at home. That way they can be able to do any of the work that they have to do while at home and kind of mitigating any of the on the surface risk that come with all of that.
You know, I've got some experience with this from my, again, my hands-on IT director life. I had worked at several different law firms, and a lot of times those applications, document management systems and things like that, got SQL databases, application servers, web servers, and they really need to be low latency in order to be able to perform, right? So having the ability to be able to see what's happening in the application running inside of the VDI instead of trying to run those things over a VPN and then having dropped connections, just the frustration around those applications can be a huge benefit, especially when we're talking about productivity. Again, my world, it was lawyers, and it was billing your time for money, right? Anything that interferes with that, especially applications, is a huge pain point.
Yeah, and just the management behind the tool, the single pane of glass, being able to push updates to every device at once, especially when everyone's using a different device, when you're all on the same desktop and the same software behind it, it makes it a lot easier to manage as well for your IT staff.
Yeah. That's huge, actually, yeah.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, thanks for giving us some insight into that, Chad. So we put that in place for Trusted Trucking. The virtual desktop was deployed. And then Trusted Trucking came back to us and they said, so now our employees are accessing the network from home. But how do we keep their endpoints safe? Because endpoints are still a major concern if you're on any sort of foreign network, right? So Chad, why don't you walk us through this one?
Yeah, sure. So this is kind of tying back to what we were talking about just a little earlier, that we don't want employees saving things on their laptops. So one, we're going to want to be able to keep all of that data secure in case someone is doing something of that sort, as well as on the VDA itself. So now that we're pushing out the public IP across the network from your office to your employees, now we want to be able to be sure that we're protecting those connections to ensure that no one's trying to breach and get into those to affect any of the employee or into the actual company level infrastructure. Now, we are utilizing LogRhythm to be able to do this. And so LogRhythm has agents. So their next gen theme platform, which is this really neat website that you can manage all of this from. It has the ability to show you kind of the data collection as well as the discovery, any of the qualifying steps. So things like exploits that might be a part of ransomware that might give it a reason to qualify that particular instance as something that might need to be investigated. And then if for whatever reason that is an exploit for ransomware, it'll neutralize that threat and then try to recover any of the, so like killing users and then trying to recover those users back, and any things that require sealing off that issue before it becomes an actual data breach. So a lot of times this kind of gets brought into the your security orchestration, automation, and response compliance and things like that. Anything that kind of comes with all of that. And so being able to often ask themselves, well, do I have the resources to be able to manage all of this? And so with LogRhythm, there's a lot of native SOAR capabilities that aid in this process. So pretty much everything I just mentioned, you're not having to do any of these things individually. LogRhythm is doing it all for you all at once so that you can kind of be more focused on the results of the investigation and what parts of that neutralization is required from your end. And on top of that, having that embedded SOAR is crucial to maintaining your workflow integrity and efficiency when trying to have that ultimate goal of recognizing and mitigating threats become, like I said, damaging cyber breaches.
You know, Chad, this is super interesting and very technical stuff that I think a lot of firms or a lot of companies, you know, who may not have a chief information security officer or chief security officer or whatever it is, need some help understanding a lot of these things. And I know I, for one, even though, again, I was hands-on for a long time, a lot of these technologies have really matured and become available more generally in the market in the last handful of years. So I'll just throw a little shot out there. If anybody who's on this has additional questions, feel free to reach out, right? Then and Chad and the team can, you know, do a deep dive on some of these things and explain how they're relevant.
Definitely. And we also have a 24/7 SOC team that's literally effectively watching us for our managed customers at all times. So that's just kind of what is going to be coming back to is a lot of this stuff used to be where you would get a low level security system that would just basically give you the discovery portion, and then you're having to do the qualify, the investigate, and the neutralize. And usually, kind of like you were saying, Dan, that tends to be the most complicated part of that secure and being security efficient process, because that's going to be what keeps people out whenever all is said and done.
Right. Right. Cool. Sydney, we got another one coming. Did we lose you?
Oh, I'm here. I was just waiting for the slide to change, but
there it goes.
Thanks, Chad. So now that we put in place the laptop security, put in place the virtual desktop, Trusted Trucking came back to us. They said, you know, we've secured our employees' endpoints, but how do we protect the data on the devices and minimize the downtime? You know, Chad kind of talked about this in the beginning. I love that example he gave about his wife and the VPN, because downtime is just such a detraction from productivity. We want to make sure our remote workers are enabled as best as we can. So Chad, why don't you walk us through this one?
Yeah, sure. And so kind of like we were going back to earlier in terms of now that we actually have the devices being watched, keeping them secure at all times, how do we kind of account for some of the other parts of things like, oh, I deleted my file myself, or, oh, you know, I swear I saved it, but now it's not there anymore. All sorts of those kind of smaller end things on top of all of the overarching things that we're talking about. And so effectively we'd want to do a workstation backup on all of those devices. Now, a lot of times we'll have a single backup being done on the entire VDA system, as well as having agent backups on those workstations, like the personal laptops themselves, just to ensure that if there are any things that are being saved on the device, we want to make sure we can retrieve those if anything were to happen. And something as simple as, you know, an employee deciding to move on to another position, how do you ensure that the data that was on that device makes it back to you? Because that intellectual property is extremely important, especially when we start talking to people who have a lot of the knowledge of the company, that maybe were doing all of the support or doing all of the making of materials for marketing and things of that sort. So having all of that data, being able to get it back in any situation that it's lost is extremely, extremely important. And so on top of all of that, we want to make sure that if it's any type of issue on the remote side, that we want to make sure that there's a seamless backup, so that if you or even your worker needs to be able to do a restore on something like a file or anything like that, that they're actually enabled to do so, or have the opportunity to enable them to do so. Because realistically, you could keep your employees from doing it themselves and manage it yourself, or enable them to do their own restores, and you're not dealing with it at all. And so kind of tying it all together, this effectively covers our, between the endpoint security and the backup, mostly trying to keep all the data that your employees are doing on an individual level safe, as well as being able to recover it from a business perspective if anything were to happen to that employee.
You know, it's funny, even though we're talking about laptop security and virtual desktops, there, you know, and I'm guilty of it, and I know plenty of people are, there are people, employees who are going to still use the Word that's, you know, installed on that laptop, and they might continue to save things locally, even if there's a policy that says they shouldn't. I used to run into this all the time, especially because the laptops, right, we were giving the employees have a lot of the same applications, and so they could really work offline and not through that VDI environment. So there's always going to be valuable work product and intellectual property that's being stored locally that has to be backed up.
Oh yeah, even I've been subject to doing this myself, realizing that I opened an Excel sheet within my laptop and then doing it and then, oh darn it, and then having to upload it to OneDrive now because I forgot to even think about that fact beforehand.
Right.
So anyone can do it. It's not just older people or newer people. Everybody will be at risk of doing this.
I'm just gonna work on this real quick, and 3 hours later, right, it's saved to the desktop.
Yep. Exactly. Totally common.
Yep.
Definitely. I've done that. All right. So thanks for going over Workstation Backup, Chad. So Trusted Trucking again, they came back to us. In the process of transitioning to remote, they felt like the best solution was to migrate to Office 365 to better enable the communication side of the business, right? So they came to us, they said, hey, we're migrating to Office 365, but we're concerned about a spike in phishing attacks and malicious emails. How do we protect our employees? So Chad, this is a really great one. Why don't you walk us through this one?
Yeah, sure. So this is one of those ones that now that we think we're backing up all the data, we should be safe, right? And that's not always the case, because the one thing we have to consider, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, is phishing attacks, and being able to, and that's just kind of off the cuff. The additional point on top of that is going to be the actual security of it all itself. So if somebody utilizes, hacks an admin account, and then, you know, what can they do once they've got a global admin account? Basically anything, right? So at that point, being able to keep that email safe from phishing attacks and making sure that we're keeping and giving employees the best chance of not clicking on a phishing email. Some of us are really good at seeing when those emails are bogus, but I've seen some really good ones over the years. I would say even in the last year or so, the Microsoft ones have gotten crazy. The last time I had something on the Microsoft side, a phishing company actually bought a retired Microsoft server and were still connected to the domain to the point where they could use part of Microsoft's older domains from 30 years ago to be able to execute a phishing attack. So you can't just think that, oh, you know, all of the emails are going to look dumb and I can tell off the cuff immediately, oh yeah, that's a phishing email. It's not necessarily the case anymore, to the point where unless you're looking at every email address that comes to your mailbox, you're really going to be at risk. So we have employed Mimecast email filtering to all of our clients, actually also internal as well, because we find that very extremely important. And we were doing this before we even worked from home, but now that everyone's working from home, you can't necessarily watch your network at all times now that people's other home networks are included. So making sure that we have some form of email filtering on top of all of that is extremely important. And so we already have Mimecast already has 37,000 plus customers that report threats directly to the MSOC for integrated apps. So anytime there's any connections or anything that we see or find that filtering, that's where that advanced protection comes into play, and making sure that we can mitigate any threats that might be coming in at a company level, not just on an individual level. On top of Mimecast being able to leverage all of this to further enrich the core detection, ensuring the accuracy and efficiency of that product so that we're making sure that we're not just blocking emails that people are actually intended to receive, right? And Mimecast also has the machine learning that you could either, if we're part of somebody who's taking care of all this for you, or if you're doing it yourself, you're able to leverage this machine learning already on your own, and pretty much it applies where appropriate to complement and enrich your guys' email threat detection. And then on top of that, it's able to proactively identify unseen attacks. So being able to specify things that maybe no one's clicked on this threatening email yet, but it's got spread out pretty far wide. And even if everybody's noticed, it's going to be important to know when those sorts of things are coming in, right? So being able to effectively know when things are coming that could potentially cause your employees risk, and being able to mitigate that immediately so that we're not having to deal with these sorts of things after the fact.
You know, that's the big one right there. The bad guys, it's their job to stay one ahead of the good guys, right? And I don't know about some of our attendees out there today, but I, in the last couple of weeks, have been receiving more suspicious kind of junk email in my Office 365 here at Veeam, right? So they're definitely, you know, pushing the envelope, and it's critically important to have additional, you know, because Microsoft's clearly not taking care of it on their own. They've got a lot of other things to do. Employing a dedicated service like this to be able to provide that next level of protection and stay ahead of this stuff is really, you know, critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a comment on this, because I think the number one infection method for cyber threats and ransomware and any other viruses is through email right now. I think people are taking advantage of unsuspecting recipients. And I think we've seen it in the very beginning of the pandemic when we had the stimulus checks rolling out. There were people pretending to be like, we need your information, and getting a lot of, you know, malicious intent that way. But another thing that I've personally seen is what they call whaling, which is when someone is pretending to be, you know, either a superior or a manager or what have you with our business. So I've seen emails come in from our boss, Sam Kumar, asking me to buy Amazon gift cards. And first of all, he would never ask me to buy an Amazon gift card, but I almost replied to them being like, what? Why? Are you sure? And then I realized, I look at the domain that it's coming from, and it's not his domain. It's CIO@something.com, but it says Sam Kumar. So there's a lot of tricky ways that it'll get you. And Mimecast has kind of caught on to those in recent years, where they're doing impersonation protect, and they're working on filtering out those domains that are kind of close to your company domain, but not quite your company domain. You know, they have a famous story on their side where someone asked their financial director or their chief financial officer to transfer $45,000 into some account, and it was coming from the CEO or the owner of the company, and they almost did it. And they barely caught it by the difference in the domain. So there's a lot of different ways that hackers are getting creative and using email to target unsuspecting people. So a lot of this comes down to human error. So what Mimecast is really great at doing, and email security in general is really great at doing, is reducing the likelihood that you'll hit that human error issue, right? They're opening links in sandboxes, ensuring they're not malicious before that gets into your inbox, which again is probably the number one infection approach, is a malicious link. So it's a great solution. Definitely. So Chad, thanks for going over that, and thanks Dan for chiming in there as well. So after Trusted Trucking had the email security implemented, they came back again. They said, so what happens if our email or Office 365 data is compromised? You know, what if Mimecast doesn't work? What if email security doesn't work? What if the worst should happen? Someone clicks a link and everything's encrypted. We can get that back from Microsoft Backup, right? Right. And this is Chad's favorite. Wrong. Microsoft does not automatically back up Office 365 data. That's a huge misconception. So Chad, walk us through this. I know you love talking about this one.
Yes, this is one of my favorite things to do, which is basically Microsoft does not protect you from anything. As much as people would like to think so, they don't. Their only responsibility is your service time. So as long as they tell you Outlook is up, that's all they care about, right? And so a big part of all of that is being able to make sure that if for whatever reason somebody's email, and it might even just be their admin account gets compromised and someone goes and deletes all of y'all's mailboxes, or it could be something as simple as somebody got into someone's specific email and deleted any important emails from there, or in the case of I just accidentally deleted all my emails myself, what do I do now kind of situation. And that always comes back to having a backup for O365. Now, a lot of people might have been doing this with their on-prem Exchange servers, and now they're trying to think about, well, now how do I do it now that we moved everyone over to O365? Now, so having that backup for O365 in place will give you the best opportunity to protecting that data, especially long term. Now, this is a good part for compliance as well, because we utilize Veeam to be able to do this now. You can either have a certain specific retention, like for a lot of legal offices, 7 years is what we hear when we're coming to meeting compliance for that, so that we have a specific retention policy for 7 years for that Microsoft O365. And then as well as some, even on the government side, where you have to keep it forever, right? And so we have the ability to do both of those. And so those compliances are probably a key and integral part to making sure you can continue with O365 and not have to come up with some other solution. So as well as with the newest and most current version of the Veeam for O365, we're able to make sure we back up all Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Microsoft Teams now data, and being able to restore all of those itemized. You're not having to restore an entire Microsoft account, just any individual thing you specifically need. Now, a part of that makes it important because being able to quickly restore these individual files is going to be kind of crucial when it comes to just on a day-to-day working basis. I feel like more often than not, I end up having to do restores for a client because someone internally did something that required us to get to this point, as opposed to some outside risk that's come in and done anything. The only example that I really have of that is somebody who got their global admin account locked out because they left a sticky note on their desk, and that an employee they had just let go. Yeah, that's the fun one, right? And so an employee that they had just let go knew of this sticky note, took it, and then made attempts to basically destroy the entire Exchange account. Now we had to go and then individually restore the entire Microsoft account. And then double checking everyone individually to make sure that everyone was up to date, right? So you can always want and hope everyone's not going to have some of their information just readily available for someone to steal. But this was an IT director that I'm referring to that let his admin password just be on his desk. So again, anyone can provide risk when it comes to all of this.
I selfishly, right, this is great for Veeam, right? There's a huge market out there, and we see a significant increase in the interest of and backing up Office 365, which has been great. And we've been beating this drum at Veeam for a couple of years now, but we've really seen the market take off, I would say, probably, with the advent or with the beginning of our lockdown and working from home and all the rest of that. But the other thing I wanted to add in here is that there are definitely businesses, and I've worked for some in the past who, maybe they don't have a lot in the way of custom applications that need to be running on servers that require VDI for access and that sort of stuff. And they really rely heavily on not only passing information, including intellectual property, via email or saving it to a SharePoint site, but we find a lot of people are using OneDrive. I definitely do for work, and making sure that, those Excel spreadsheets we were talking about a little while ago that you're saving, don't save them on the desktop, God forbid you lose the laptop, but even if you're saving it in your OneDrive, being able to restore that stuff should something catastrophic happen is crucially important. Just more and more is being kept inside of that Microsoft ecosystem.
Definitely.
Cool.
All right, thanks for that, Chad. So we kind of come full circle here to this final challenge. We've put in so many different solutions for trusted trucking at this point, and now they're coming to us, and this is real. Again, this is a real life example. They're coming to us now and they're asking us, now that we're almost out of the pandemic, how do we scale these products? How do we deal with managing them when companies like us are really kind of limited with their IT staff, and the pandemic wasn't great to us. We're seeing a lot of static budgets. We don't have a lot of money to throw around to scale this. But how might we approach something like this? So Chad, we're dealing with this with them right now. Can maybe walk us through what we're offering?
Yeah, sure. And so in the case of trusted trucking, this is kind of pretty common, I would say, in the industry that you solve one problem for your customer base and then they come back to you with another, right? So and that's definitely something that I believe even through the the course of everything we've walked through today, everyone's had to experience something like this with their customers before. And it always ends up coming to the same question at the end, which is, does that company think that managed services is the proper way to go next? Mainly because, especially now in the IT field, a lot of people feel that as time's gone, and kind of what Sydney was touching on, that as time has gone on through the pandemic, a lot of IT companies are shrinking their staffing to be able to just stay alive throughout all of this because of companies like restaurants, things that have gone out of business, and revenue streams that maybe you had pretty locked down before, but just simply because of the pandemic, now that those revenue streams are starting to dry up, being able to find and utilize a different way to keep your customer base happy and utilizing managed services to do so, because a lot of times managed services will cost you less than the salary of one employee, depending on what level tech we're talking about. But if we're talking about all of these different things for less than 100 users, you're typically going to be less than a $35,000 employee would cost you. So that's something that you could always think about and utilize. And then at that point, you're utilizing, in the case of us, you'd be using all of our NOC, our stock, and all of the employees that we have at your disposal if your customers ever have any issues. And so a big part of that then goes to scalability. You might see that scaling out all of this over time would be really great, but if, let's say, you guys increase your customer base and now you have 100 additional users on a 365 than you did before, and no one in your company is there to support it because all of your techs were meant to do on-prem exchange sort of thing, this is a good way to help mitigate that issue. Having another team at your disposal to get your issues resolved. And on top of that, having managed services can minimize downtime. So in the terms of security even, we're having our SOC doing 24/7 pretty much detection on everything, having someone always there watching all of these different things in play. So looking at all the data breaches, we should have this really fun map in the office that would show pretty much everywhere in the world that we were seeing things coming from. And it's obviously always endless. So having those people in place to watch that 24/7 so you don't have to also saves you a lot of money and is obviously more cost effective, as well as then staffing requirements to meet compliance can be alleviated by managed services, because now you have somebody else watching it all for you. You have SLAs, MSAs, and all of that to cover your stuff, and making sure that everything that you're doing for your end users are covered as far as those SLAs and MSAs are concerned, and making sure that all compliances are met while not having to deal with any of the issues yourself, right? And then at least again with NewCloud, we have 24/7 expert support so that we have people literally on call at all times on the phone, ready to answer calls or ready to take those emails or those chat tickets and look and fix and resolve your issues as soon as possible.
You know, Chad, I'll throw in here again. As I said earlier, I spent 10 years as the IT director at a couple of different law firms here in Denver, and I used to sort of joke, not joke, that I would use managed services providers to change the oil and rotate the tires as part of it. Of course, being able to go on vacation and have somebody with familiarity with the environment and the applications, if something happened, there was always 24-hour support, and I would, end up being the person who was engaging with those experts at the support desk. But the other thing that we're seeing more and more is that this process of digital transformation is complicated. And this example with Trusted Trucking is a really good one, right? Expecting that Trusted Trucking would have somebody who's an expert in VDI and an expert in security and an expert in backups, an expert in cloud is just not realistic, right? So as much as it's convenient to have somebody kind of looking over your shoulder, having an existing relationship with the partner that can help guide you down the road, this digital transformation road of moving things into the cloud efficiently, whether it's cost efficiently or time efficiently, is also a critical component as we look at the IT world, right? We're always being pushed, and it's important to be working with people with experience and expertise.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. And so that kind of leads me into my next point, which is kind of driving home those 5 essential solutions for remote workers. So to kind of tie it all together, you have your virtual desktops, your laptop endpoint security, the backup for those workstations, and then the email security, as well as backing up the O365. Now, why each of those are important is hopefully we've talked about through the course of this call, but virtual desktops are obviously going to be the best way for you to mitigate any issues when it comes to having a workforce that's strictly working from home or even on the move all the time, especially kind of like what Dan was mentioning earlier. And then touching on that more, that again just builds into the, okay, now we have to keep it all secure. And then that secure point comes from the actual endpoints themselves, as well as the actual email or other physical infrastructure that's all included with that. So doing backups, having email filtering, and doing backups of your Exchange, and all of that is going to be a crucial point of being able to have a long-term work from home workforce, as well as being able to scale and build from that workforce in case your business actually has to pivot and move 100% work from home or 50% or whatever the reason might be, because especially now that we're a little over a year into this, even with the vaccine coming and things like that, there's questions of how this is all going to proceed when we're all done with it, right? So making sure that having all of these things thought of and covered will pretty much give you the best bet at being able to work and utilize your workforce at home at all times without having to worry too much about risks and security and things of that sort, because you already got it covered.
Great. Thanks, Chad. Dan, any last comments on any of these solutions before we jump into our NewCloud overview?
Oh, this has been really great. And, of course, we talked about this presentation before we actually gave it. And I think the important thing, to take away here and hopefully the value that people see in the presentation is understanding the actual implementation, right? This is a real customer that was like, oh no, how are we going to handle this? And these are the solutions that were put in place, and they've been successful with it, right? So if you come away with nothing else from this, understand that there are measures that you can put in place to secure that and enable that remote workforce, right?
Yeah, and I think I'd add to that, this is just a sampling. I think I said it a few times here, but every company is different, and there are many things that we can do as a service provider to help our customers tailored to what they need, custom solutions. It doesn't have to fit cookie cutter into this, and that kind of leads me into the who NewCloud is. We're a cloud service provider that doesn't really believe in cookie cutter solutions. We believe that every customer has a different environment and a different solution that might be a good use case for them versus someone else. So kicking things off on our NewCloud overview here, just taking a step forward, if you will, into who we are. So NewCloud, we're a cloud service provider. We were founded in 1988. Obviously, back then we weren't called NewCloud or selling cloud services. That would have been some really great foresight on our part. But we've evolved over the years to offer solutions that are in line with the changing tides of technology. So we've branched into cloud solutions back in 2013, and now we're moving into security solutions that really support our customers and our clients as best we can. And during this transformation that we've gone through, we've amassed over 1,000 customers in the U.S. and in Europe, and we've built a reputation for quality within our industry. We're partnered with Veeam from a platinum level perspective. We're a Veeam cloud service provider, and we're also a enterprise level VMware service provider as well. So we work really closely with our partners. We work really closely with our customers, and we've developed an industry leading customer satisfaction rate and retention rate of 95%. So we're very proud of our reputation within the industry, and we work hard to make sure that our customers are happy as well. What you're looking at here is a nationwide breakdown of our cloud network. So our network is built using best-in-breed technology from NetApp, Cisco, and VMware, as well as others. And when we talk about cloud platforms, the important thing to remember is we want to ensure high availability and low latency. So our network latency numbers are less than 27 milliseconds between any two locations. Our boss likes to say, if you blink, that's about a second. So it's less than the blink of an eye to get data across the pipe between locations here. The geographic diversity of our network also helps to ensure that our customers have their data both far enough away from their main site so that it won't be affected by the same natural disasters, but close enough so that it's usable when they actually do need to stand up VMs or restore data or access that repository. And we get asked all the time, what makes us great? And at NewCloud, our answer is always the same. We believe that great technology is powered by great people, and we're always being compared to Amazon and Microsoft, and they're asking us what stands apart, and our answer is we believe in personalized service. And I kind of touched on this before. We're not a 1-800 number. Our customers are what's most important to us, and we have top engineers that are available to them 24/7 by 365 to help with any issues that might pop up. We know that no two companies are the same, and we don't believe in any cookie cutter cloud solutions. So we work closely with our customers to develop solutions that do address their core business needs, whatever those may be for each individual customer. And we implement these solutions using best-in-breed technology, and we're able to do it at an affordable price. So really, when it comes to what makes us great, the bottom line is that we believe in taking care of our customers, and we really stand by that. We kind of go bend over backwards for our customers, and I'm sure Chad could attest to that. He's been in a lot of late nights troubleshooting a lot of different calls with a lot of different customers throughout their process of doing this transition to remote work as well. So really, we mean it when we say we care.
Oh, yeah.
And with that, I'd like to open up the Q&A. I haven't seen a lot of questions come in through the chat, so I do want to just note that you do have the ability to contact each of us directly if anything should pop up after we finish the webinar here. We really love communicating with our customers and working through any sort of issues that you guys might have on a specific level to your business. And we're happy to jump on calls and walk through what sort of solutions might be a best fit for you guys as you're dealing with this post-pandemic life or, the work from home decision and how you're going to be handling that as well. So again, please feel free to reach out to us. I'll kind of leave the question feature on the screen open. You can use that after the webinar ends as well, and that'll email us directly any questions that you have if we don't get to them today. But it doesn't look like we have many questions coming through. So with that, I will just go ahead and say thank you all very much for joining the webinar today. Please feel free to contact us, and don't forget to fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. So thank you again. We really appreciate your participation and your time, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Sydney. Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, and Sydney, just so I cover it for everybody, will they be getting an email for the survey so they can get their lunch credits, or how will that work, and what should everyone expect?
It should pop up on the screen right when I close the webinar.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan.
All right. Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone.
Have a good day.